The Disney Plus animated series Your Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man is an amazing take on the character, or should I say, spectacular.
You serious?
Initially, I was skeptical of the show given the fact Disney has a not so good track record with the webhead when it came to animation. Ultimate Spider-Man, while it gets way too much hate, was inferior to Spectacular. Spectacular Spider-Man is a fantastic show that adapted the comic book in a great way. Ultimate was a bit less serious and had fourth wall breaks, which annoyed some people. What did not help Ultimate's case was that Josh Keaton got dubbed over in Avengers Earth's Mightiest Heroes in favor of Drake Bell, who starred in Ultimate Spider-Man. The episode was meant to cross over with Spectacular, and Disney's controversial choice soured people on the new show. Then there's the 2017 show, which I thought would be an improvement at first glance, but it ended up being worse. The voice cast in the show is decent, with Spidey being voiced by Robbie Daymond, aka Akechi from Persona 5 Royal, and Najee Jeter, the voice of Insomniac Miles, playing the series version of the character. We also get Josh Keaton playing the villain for once as Norman Osborn. Sadly, the show was not an improvement of Ultimate at all. Cheaper animation, a more grating Peter Parker with his nerdiness cranked up to 100, and everyone in the school has spider powers, making him less special. Honestly, I'll take Ultimate over 2017 any day. At least the Spider-Verse episodes were pretty good. Speaking of Spider-Verse, it is pretty clear those movies by Sony were way better than anything Disney cranked out after buying Marvel. The best Spider-Man cartoons for a while were not made by Disney at all, with series like 1994 being made long before the Disney buyout. So with Sony outdoing Marvel with the beloved Spectacular Spider-Man cartoon and the Spider-Verse movies, it was clear they needed to step up with the wall crawler in animation. While they do not own the movie rights, they do own the TV rights after all, so making a quality show was a no-brainer, and thus, Your Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man was born. Your Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man was a show I was optimistic about, but still skeptical at the same time. I saw the concept art of the show and it looked great. I assumed it'd be 2D animated, however, then the trailer leaked, revealing it to be cel-shaded CGI. A ton of people seeing that animation believed the show would suck. I will admit, I am tired of Disney drifting away from 2D animation. For example, Chip and Dale should have used 2D animation in the film, but they cheaped out in cel-shaded Chip. Still, while I found the cel-shaded animation style of the upcoming show a slight disappointment, I was still looking forward to it as it had a great writer attached to it, that person being Jeff Trammell. Trammell wrote for a beloved Cartoon Network series called Craig of the Creek. While the show was created by two white guys, he was a person of color behind the scenes who contributed a lot to the show. So, to see Jeff Trammell write for Spider-Man piqued my interest. To no surprise, he crafted a great show with diverse characters that features a hero Stan Lee famously said, "Anyone can wear the mask of." Anyway, that's enough background information. Let's get into the story itself. Your Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man, which I'll call Friendly Neighborhood to keep things short, is essentially a what-if episode stretched into its own animated series. They even got Hudson Thames from What If to voice Spider-Man in this show. I will not address his controversial comments here, but rather talk about his performance. He does a fine Tom Holland impression. At the show's start, we learn Uncle Ben died before Peter became Spider-Man. His true origin begins with an alien similar to Venom wreaking havoc at Midtown High after Doctor Strange opens a portal accidentally. It's here he meets Nico Minoru, a Runaways character who he saves from the alien. A spider drops out of the portal and bites Peter, leading to him passing out. A few months pass by, and then we see Peter already established as Spider-Man in the first episode. He ends up saving Harry Osborn from some thugs. He's played by a great VA too, that being Zeno Robinson, who I loved in his roles in Persona 3 Reload and the movie Dragon Ball Super Superhero. Harry asks if he can pay him, but Spidey turns him down. Peter then goes to a new school due to Midtown's destruction called Rockford Vales. else. Due to this disruption in the timeline, Peter never meets Flash, Ned, or MJ like he does in the MCU, which this series seems to be loosely based on. Because of this, Peter meets different characters besides Nico, like Pearl Pangan, who is his new love interest. I thought she was created for the show, but she's actually a hero called Wave in the comic. Peter has feelings for her, but she's in a relationship with Lonnie Lincoln, a teenaged version of Tombstone, an iconic Spider-Man villain. He decides to partner up with him, and you'd think this would be the start of a rivalry between the two. However, this trope of the dumb mean jock gets subverted as Peter and Lonnie bond over their love of science. The two become fast friends and say their goodbyes. My favorite part of this episode definitely is when things shift to Lonnie's point of view, where we see the stuff he has to deal with, like being racially profiled on his way home. Still, despite that, his home life is not as rough as he has a loving mother and father. Following this, we see Peter have some mercy and let a criminal go who was robbing a pizza place because she is poor.
Pizza guy, sir? I mean, it's ultimately up to you, but she was just down on her luck. I don't know. Maybe let her go just this once?
Yeah. Okay, fine.
Hey, it's okay. It's okay. You made a mistake. Just please don't make me regret this.
I won't.
It's a really impactful scene as it shows this Spider-Man's humanity. Peter then finds a DVD player and we get a recreation of his introduction in the MCU in Civil War. However, rather than have Tony Stark mentor Peter Parker, we have Norman Osborn mentor him instead. This change makes Friendly Neighborhood extremely compelling. Since this is an Elseworlds, it really makes you wonder if Norman is good. Unlike prior incarnations we've seen, he discovers his secret identity as Spider-Man in the second episode, which is shown to have disturbed Peter greatly at the start of the third one.
So, you're Spider-Man. So, you're Spider-Man. So, you're Spider-Man.
A security camera captures Peter dressing as Spider-Man after he leaves his internship there to fight an arsonist called Wu-Tang. Peter tries to chalk it up to a prank, however, Norman reveals he is the only person who had access to that security camera. As it turns out, the entire internship at Oscorp was created by him in order to discover which young scientist was assisting Spider-Man. Norman did this after he saw the webhead save Harry, which he was very grateful about. He offers Oscorp's help to Peter, however, he's unsure and initially declines. That is, until Norman, without his permission, assists him in battling Speed Demon and Tarantula by explaining to Spidey that they are using tech they don't fully know how to use. Following that episode, Peter accepts working with Osborn and learns about the Sokovia Accords. Because Tony Stark did not mentor Peter Parker, he never went to the airport in the battle between heroes. While heroes need to register, Norman tells Spider-Man that he can work independently from them.
I mean, I heard things were crazy, but I mean, they're the Avengers. They'll patch things up, right?
Maybe. Maybe not. That's their problem to solve. You're your own hero.
This scene is great as I personally had my issues with MCU's Spider-Man being tied to Tony Stark. I don't hate the two heroes' relationship in the movies, but this shows Spider-Man is way more comic accurate. Following that conversation, Peter tests several suits that are actually from a Spider-Man story where he dons several superhero identities titled Identity Crisis. He dislikes all the suits, so he ends up being given the Future Foundation suit from the Fantastic Four comics. Actually, it's technically the Oscorp suit, it just happens to have a very similar design. Peter loves the new suit and tells Norman, but he accidentally reveals his identity to Harry in episode 4. This leads to Norman's son officially becoming a part of Team Spider-Man in the following episode. Since Norman is busy, he puts his son Harry in charge as the guy in the chair. This is where Peter and Harry, who are best friends in the comics, truly bond. They end up bonding over their mutual love for Captain America, who Peter says he still supports despite the Accord.
Honestly, it could use a lot more color too.
True. I would like a lot more red and blue, like
Captain America.
Wait, you're a Cap fan too? I thought everyone was turning on him now.
No way, man. So he broke a few laws to help his best friend. Who wouldn't?
Damn, this show honestly feels like an apology to those who had a problem with MCU Spider-Man, and I am all for it. Harry ends up driving Peter to school, which surprises all the students at Rockford Bales. This includes Nico, who seems not to like him despite following him on social media. By the tail end of episode 4, it is clear as day, Spider-Man's Rogues Gallery is getting set up. Like, look at this guy's face. He is definitely Craven the Hunter. He's totally him. Just kidding, he's clearly the Rhino, and Dimitri is definitely the Chameleon. Back to episode 5, I find the concept of Peter's Rogues Gallery coming from Dr. Otto Octavius very interesting. In this show, he has a rivalry with Norman Osborn. Mila ends up getting a laser helmet after her criminal friends get arrested in an effort to break from jail. However, after freeing them, Mila decides to wreak havoc. It's here she decides to attack Mikhail, and Peter decides to shield him. This episode definitely is setting up the Rhino as he promises to fight the wall crawler despite being saved by him. Despite Peter's heroics being supported by Norman, there are hints he is up to no good. This is emphasized with Daredevil investigating Oscorp. It honestly was really cool seeing the two fight each other on screen, as it may be a while till we get a street-level Spider-Man film if the Sony wanting another multiverse film rumors are to be believed. The interaction between the two does not last the full episode, but it is a very memorable part of episode 6. After dealing with Daredevil, Peter accidentally reveals he was Spider-Man all along to Nico, which makes her initially upset. The two are best friends, and she's upset he did not tell her. This conflict continues until the end of the season. I honestly like this subplot as we get some fun interactions between Harry and Nico, like her drag racing his car. This happens since Harry feels bad he told her Spider-Man's identity, and he explains to her that Peter meant to protect her. Harry and Nico have good chemistry in the later scenes they are in together. Honestly, I'm really curious if the two will end up being a thing in this show. Finally, I want to talk about Scorpion, this season's big bad, but before I can do that, I need to address Lonnie Lincoln's transformation into Tombstone. Lonnie Lincoln becoming Tombstone is a really great arc in this first season. I love how it mirrors Peter Parker becoming Spider-Man. After he discovers his brother Dre is in the 110th Street Gang, Lonnie switches places with him. Prior to joining the gang, he was a successful football player, but he ends up so deep in the 110th Street Gang that he misses practice and gets kicked out of the team. His absence also confuses Pearl. Lonnie initially is tasked with getting burritos for the gang, but runs into Camilla, a member of the Scorpions. He ends up scared for his life, running away from another member of the gang who chases him. Lonnie avoids him, but because Camilla saw him, he is now in too deep and must stay alongside the 110th. The Scorpions end up showing up to their turf, and Matt Gargan, their leader, nearly kills Big Don, so Lonnie saves him. I love how this scene is mirrored in that episode, with Spidey saving Rhino. Lonnie then ends up getting the name Tombstone.
Hell, the way you buried Gargan, we should start calling you Gravedigger.
Nah, we should call you Tombstone.
Tombstone? Yeah, I can't lie. Kinda like it.
The Scorpion is what leads to Spidey and Tombstone stories colliding. Mac ends up getting a Scorpion suit from Doc Ock to take his revenge on Tombstone and Big Don, and attacks the gang's building. To make things worse, Pearl visits the 110th's headquarters after Dre tells her what Lonnie has been up to. Spider-Man ends up saving the two and then takes on Scorpion. This moment is where the show takes a brutal turn. One I did not expect. At first, Spidey successfully wraps up the Scorpion with webbing, but he runs out. The Scorpion breaks free, then impales Peter's suit, showing blood. He pleads Norman for help, but he's not listening and is more focused on his rivalry with Otto Octavius than helping him. Eventually though, Spidey does end up getting carried away by a Green Goblin glider. The following episode 8 focuses on the fallout with the Scorpion. Scorpion, with Peter having traumatic nightmares about the experience. It's here we see Oscorp scientists take some of his blood. I love this episode because it has no action here, but rather explores the problems with being a superhero. The only exception is a cool scene where Doc Ock's arms are utilized in a creative way, as they are a form of security for his headquarters before Iron Man apprehends him. As far as the drama with Peter goes this episode, we get a heartfelt talk with Aunt May after Peter lies he got in a skateboarding accident with Harry. It's here where she mentions things have been rough since Uncle Ben's passing. I really love how this show addresses Ben and shows his importance despite him never knowing about Peter's powers. Because of Ben's absence, it is Norman who says a variation of the Great Power quote, although it is far more sinister. Rather than say responsibility, he instead says,
"With great power comes great respect. And if you don't have respect, you have nothing."
Peter wants to return as Spider-Man to stop Scorpion, but also for the sake of Lonnie, who he unfortunately could not convince to stop his troubled lifestyle as Peter Parker. However, Norman is iffy about Peter fighting the Scorpion and says police could take care of it. It ends up being Harry who tells him not to listen to his dad, as being a hero is up to him. Behind Norman's back, he ended up making Spidey's iconic costume for Peter and tells him,
Go get him, Tiger.
a line usually said by MJ. Episode 9 is definitely where the overarching story mostly comes to a close. After Big Don abandons the 110th Street Gang, Spider-Man and Tombstone end up teaming up together to fight the Scorpion as he becomes too much for the webhead to handle alone. Lonnie is able to do this after accidentally inhaling a chemical that gives him super strength, including strong skin that Scorpion can't pierce. So, essentially, he's kinda like Luke Cage. However, after Spidey witnesses Lonnie being crushed by some rubble, he ends up considering taking Scorpion's life while thinking about the great respect line Norman told him. Surprisingly, it is Tombstone who stops the webhead from killing Scorpion. This scene reminded me a lot of where MCU Spidey almost killed Green Goblin by his own glider, only to be stopped by Raimi's Spidey. Spider-Man spares Scorpion after listening to Tombstone's advice, and they dab each other up just like they did back when they went to high school together. It is a nice culmination of both of their season 1 arcs, despite one going the heroic path and the other going the villainous path. It is also in this episode where Peter and Nico make up, and she thanks him for saving her from the symbiotic alien back when he did have powers. The episode seems to have a nice conclusion, but a sinister threat is teased, with Norman making radioactive spiders of his own with Peter's DNA. While episode 9 wrapped up the Scorpion plot, episode 10 teases the future of Friendly Neighborhood. It's here some of Norman's true intentions are revealed, with him wanting to build a portal to space. Doctor Strange returns and he warns Norman of the danger. It's here we learn his true motives when he blames Strange for destroying the school, noting that he hates superpowered individuals.
You guys with your powers floating above us as if you're better, not realizing the problems you're making for the rest of us to clean up.
However, the portal opens and the alien from the start of the show returns. We get a cool action set piece when Norman, the scientist, and interns leave, with Spidey and Doctor Strange teaming up to bring the alien back into space. Doctor Strange ends up time traveling and inadvertently causes Peter's origin at the start. The spider that bit Peter was actually one that used his blood at Oscorp in the future, which is a bit confusing, but to be honest, it likely was radioactive too, so it makes sense to me. So yeah, Friendly Neighborhood Peter is an anomaly like Miles. I love this episode as it teases the symbiote planet Clintar, where Spidey and Doctor Strange see in the portal briefly. A bit of symbiote remains, and Norman ends up fighting it later. Due to this reckless experiment, Peter drifts away from Norman, as does Harry, as they create a new group for Spider-Man called Web. We also learn that an Oscorp intern named Jean Foucault, aka Finesse, was spying on Norman for Daredevil the whole time. We get a tease of Nico's magical powers, Doc Ock draws his arms in prison, setting up his revenge against Norman Osborn, the person who put him in the cell in the first place. The season then ends with an interesting twist of Peter's father Richard Parker being alive and in jail, voiced by Josh Keaton. Spidey does a final swing and the show comes to a close. Overall, Your Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man is the best modern animated Spider-Man show. This is the most comic-accurate cartoon since Spectacular. This show depicts his rogues gallery perfectly, and the show focuses strictly on street-level villains. This show takes what worked with the 90s series and Spectacular and improves on the formula. This is by far the most violent Spider-Man show besides the MTV one, which I have yet to watch. It definitely has some other comic book TV influence as well, but not from Marvel, with plots of Spider-Man having a team helping him led by his comic book arch enemy and having his dad in prison played by an actor who previously voiced the Webhead. It is clear that this show took some inspiration from the DC CW show The Flash. Overall, Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man is the best modern animated TV Spider-Man adaptation of Peter Parker. Spider-Man isn't with S.H.I.E.L.D. He does not work alongside other Spider people, making him less special. Rather, he is the sole hero of this story. While I do love team-ups here and there, Spider-Man being independent is what I love about this character. I am glad the creator of this series decided to tell an original story rather than be an MCU prequel like they originally intended. If they did that, Spider-Man would have a smaller rogues gallery, so I am glad they went with a what-if story instead. Overall, I really love the diversity in this show as it reflects an accurate modern New York City. I also don't mind that Norman and Harry are race swapped, as their personalities from the comics are left intact. Overall, I am highly anticipating season 2. Concept art has been released of Spider-Gwen being in the show. I hope Friendly Neighborhood handles her better than 2017, as too many spider people could overcrowd the show. People are theorizing online that she might be Norman's new protege, and honestly, I'd be all for it. Regardless, I am glad Friendly Neighborhood has more seasons on the way, as I was worried it would not continue since Disney stopped production after season 1 was finished. This show was in development since 2021 according to Jeff Trammell, so I'm glad it's finally out. It's great that Marvel Animation has redeemed itself. Disney saw what Sony was doing with Spider-Verse and decided to cook up a good Spider-Man story for once. The fact it isn't tied to the MCU is great, as there's tons of stories that can be told. This has been Shade X, and I hope you all feel nothing but good vibes.